Hey y'all, welcome back to the channel. If you are new, I invite you to subscribe. It really does mean the world. If you are returning, I thank you / apologize, whatever's relevant. If you're new, it's likely because, and you're here, it's likely because you dig my Disney content, you're interested in watching me mouth off about film, TV, and book reviews, or women's issues. Tonight, we are here for Disney content. And so yeah, if that's something that you're into, please subscribe, turn on the notification bell so you know when these types of videos go live, and I'll link the appropriate playlist in the iCards. But this video was inspired by a tickle I've had up my ass for about a month. Well, I've had the tickle for several months, but I took action about a month ago. And that tickle was predicated on two things. Number one, I grew up in Orlando. I spent my first 37 years on this planet beholden to Walt Disney World as my home park, and I will be till the day I die. But as a California resident for the past 8 years, I have become a pass holder and fallen so deeply in love with Disneyland, not just because it is the original park and it's quaint and it's this and it's that, but just because it is so steeped in history, energetically, literally, you can touch things that Walt has touched, walk the streets that he and the original, WED people and Imagineers touched and built. So, yes, that in concert with several visits to the Walt Disney Family Museum, which is here in San Francisco. If you do have the privilege of visiting, I highly recommend you make that a stop. I've come to not only appreciate Imagineering more than I thought was possible, based on the amount of coffee table books that I have, but very specifically just the history of Walt Disney World as a company, and Walt Disney as a man. But I was struck, I have there's so much content online about the original animators, dating back to Iwerks, which even there's just not even, you haven't even scratched the surface of getting to know Iwerks and the impact he had on the Walt Disney Company. I'm waiting for somebody to make a movie about him. But there's so much content, and there's so much, I have 8 coffee table books, not including the 2 Nine Old Men animation flip books. There's just so much stuff on the men that helped build the Walt Disney Company. Where are the ladies? So I started doing research on the female Imagineers behind WED and behind Imagineering, WED being Walter Elias Disney. WED Company, WED Incorporated, was the precursor to modern day Imagineering. There's just nothing. There's an article here, an article there. There is a new book that just came out, which I will link in the description, which I have just started to read, which is just so long overdue, but it is very specifically about the women animators at the Walt Disney Company dating back to the early 50s. So, that was the tickle up my ass. So I started a series last month, and I'll link the video, of course, above, on Harriet Burns, who was the original female Imagineer at the Walt Disney Company, famous for working at the 64-65 World's Fair and creating attractions such as Pirates, Haunted Mansion, which we're going to talk a lot about tonight, and the Enchanted Tiki Room. Not only designing and crafting and literally manufacturing, molding those birds with her own 2 hands, but she and the woman we're going to talk about tonight literally hand-placed feathers on all of those birds. So Harriet Burns paved the way for Miss Leota Toombs. Now, you cannot make this shit up. If you don't know, if Leota doesn't ring a bell for you, we're going to ring it for you. But Madame Leota of Haunted Mansion fame is based on an actual ink and paint animation Imagineer badass, Leota Toombs. you can't make that up. Her name is Leota Toombs. Granted, it's spelled Toombs, but still, you can't make it up. And of course, I'm joined by the normal motley crew. Lucifer's here with me. Of course, we have Nana, Grumpy Cat, may he rest in peace, is always with us. And Eva, and Doggo from Pirates is here, thanks to my most recent Disneyland trip. Oh, sidebar. I don't have any Haunted Mansion apparel. This is not something that I'm proud of. If you've watched any of my 3-part series on my Disney t-shirt collection, you'll know that to be true. Part 4 coming soon. So I'm just rocking, you know, like a Horizons moment, you know? Just a Horizons moment. But I do have a Haunted Mansion mug, which I don't even know if you'll be able to see that, but it says I'm not a morning person. The spoon is a shovel, and I'm taking it out because it's noisy. And what does it say? You have to earn... Yeah, you have to earn your rest. Puns on puns on puns. So, with all of that being said, huge preface to this video, I apologize. We're going to talk about Miss Leota Lee Toombs, aka Madame Leota, tonight. So cheers, let's get into it. As I said, like, there's just like this deficit when it comes to information about the women, especially the women who helped build WED and Disney and Imagineering. We're getting a lot more information on the modern day women of Disney Imagineering, especially with D23. There's amazing panels from the last couple of years with the women Imagineers who've given us and gifted us some of the more recent attractions at both parks and international parks, of course. But yeah, there's just not a lot. So I have some notes. I will be referring to them. But I just thought we could get to know Leota because her history is just amazing, and you can't make it up. She was actually born in Los Angeles in 1925. She was originally working for the Walt Disney Company in the ink and paint department, which was predominantly female back then. Leota was the youngest employee of WED, Walter Elias Disney, which was the original name, again, for Imagineering, for the WED, company for Imagineering. She was the youngest. She was 16 when she went to work for the ink and paint department. And again, if you have the privilege of going to the Family Museum in San Francisco, they have a whole section on that department alone. It's really amazing. So yeah, she eventually moved to the animation department, where she met her husband Harvey. I don't know his last name, but it's okay because we're not here to talk about Harvey. But he was pretty, established already within the company as an animator. He had worked on Sleeping Beauty, Cinderella, Pinocchio, Peter Pan. In 1947, they married. They ultimately had 2 daughters, one of whom is Kim Irvine, which I will be doing a video on because she also is a Walt Disney Imagineer. So Leota left the company for a considerable amount of years to raise her 2 daughters and returned to WED/Imagineering in 1962. At this point, Walt Disney had solicited her to work on the production of the 1964-65 World's Fair in New York to help design signage for It's a Small World and Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, which debuted at the World's Fair prior to becoming attractions at Walt Disney World and Disneyland. Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln belonging exclusively to Disneyland. And if, again, you get a chance to go to the Family Museum, you actually get to see a lot of the stuff from the original World's Fair on display there. It's pretty amazing. She ultimately would become famous for the Haunted Mansion, which we're going to get to, but she worked with Harriet Burns in creating, designing, and literally crafting, putting individual feathers on the birds in the Enchanted Tiki Room. Now, if you're a person that goes to Disney and does not make it your business to go to the Enchanted Tiki Room, shame on you. It's not sexy. It doesn't drop you from the sky. You don't go upside down. But you know what it does do? It steeps you in history. It allows you to pay your respects. And it just delights you. Why don't you just allow yourself to be fucking delighted? Go to the Enchanted Tiki Room, whether you're at Disneyland or Disney World, get a Dole Whip. Pay your dues. I mean, it's that simple. Yes. So, on to the Haunted Mansion. So if you do know Madame Leota as being part of the Haunted Mansion, or you don't, I was taken aback when I was doing research on Harriet Burns that Leota Toombs was ultimately the impetus for the creation of Madame Leota, as we now know her, in the seance room portion of the attractions, both in Disneyland and Disney World respectively, and I'm sure in parks internationally, I'm not sure, as the dismembered head that floats inside of the crystal ball. So Harriet Burns was working on the concept for the Haunted Mansion, which, again, fun fact, just learned this. So many wrinkles in my brain. Walter had... Why am I calling him Walter? Walt had wanted the Haunted Mansion to open as an attraction in like 1962, 1963, which would have been like 8 years after park opening. It had been a concept, and originally it was conceptualized as a walkthrough attraction. It had been conceptualized prior to the World's Fair in 64, 65. I just learned this. But it didn't ultimately become realized as an attraction at Disneyland until 1969. Reason being is so many resources and so much manpower went to the production of the World's Fair, which is obviously for the better. We probably wouldn't have Disney as we know it today. And if you're interested in a little bit more Haunted Mansion history, I was fortunate enough to see the 999 Happy Haunts exhibit at Disneyland earlier this year. I'll link it in an iCard. It's just a quick little walkthrough of some of the original concept art, some of which made it into the attraction, some of which didn't. It had original maquettes of the gravedigger, the dog, just incredible stuff. So if you're interested in that, check it out. But yeah, so they had originally planned on Harriet Burns being the face of Madame Leota. However, they, I don't know who they are, but they were men, just didn't feel like Harriet was right features-wise for that mood. So I learned this when doing the research for the Harriet Burns video, that they ultimately approached Leota, and found that her features suited what they were looking for in terms of tone and mood better. But also, they decided to go with her because her features were such that her eyes were far enough apart to where it made it easier to actually project the image onto the cast that sits inside of the crystal ball. And Leota is quoted as saying, "As I remember, my eyes were the right distance apart to fit the test model when the whole thing began." And her daughter Kim recounts that she only agreed to do it because she thought it'd be fun. But the projection mapping, as it were, in 60, whenever, when they were actually doing this, favored Leota's features better. Another fun fact is that the little bride, not the main bride, but the little bride you see at the exit of the attraction that is inviting you to come back and bring your death certificate, is also Madame... I keep saying Madame Leota. Talk about a legacy. Is also Leota Toombs' face and her voice. Madame Leota in the seance room is Leota Toombs' face, but not her voice. So they didn't like Harriet Burns' features, so they went with Leota's face. They didn't like Leota's voice, so they went with is it Eleanor Obley? I think it's Eleanor Obley, who was the voice of Maleficent and Lady Tremaine. So that's who you're actually hearing when you're in the seance room. So, fun facts all day. In 1971, I just learned this. I'm going to say that so many times because I'm just so excited about all this rich history that I never thought I'd, learn. In 1971, she moved to Florida, to Central Florida, to become part of the creation of the Florida Project, which is what Walt Disney World was referred to when it was in its conception and construction phases. I don't know when her first husband Harvey passed away, but she ultimately met her second husband, Hugh Thomas, whilst working on the Florida Project. and he was, I think, the head of landscaping at that time. And yeah, you know, speaking of not having a lot of information on her, I mean, that's kind of where the story ends. In 1979, they moved back to Los Angeles. They opened some sort of ceramics design company, had some success with that. She went back to work for the Walt Disney Company as a trainer of up-and-coming Imagineers. And sadly, she died of cancer on December 21st, 1991. In 2001, we see the first D23 conference. If you're not familiar with D23, I'll link that hour-and-a-half video of me going off at the mouth at 2019's D23 conference above. But it's basically Disney's fan club, and every 2 years they have a huge convention in Anaheim, where you can live your Disney bliss. But that's also where they unveil, like, new projects for the parks, for the company in all its forms, IP, and that's where they have a lot of panels, of course. And there's one from 2017, which I'll put in the description box. That's a panel with just female Imagineers. But in 2001, we saw the premiere of the D23 conference as we know it today, and 2009 is when this happened. D23 premiered in 2009. In 2001, two amazing things happened as part of Leota Toombs' legacy. The first thing being they created a dedicated gravestone for her in Walt Disney World at the Haunted Mansion. And it's actually an animated gravestone, so her eye actually blinks. Again, didn't even know this, never paid close enough attention. Will do now. In 2001, they approached her daughter, Kim Irvine, again, we're going to be doing a video on her as well, to be used, because of the similarity of their features, to be used as a model in updating Madame Leota's portion of the ride in the Haunted Mansion. Reason being is 2001 was the first year that we saw Disneyland introduce the Nightmare Before Christmas overlay to the ride, which is amazing, life-changing. Just saw it for the first time. But they wanted to update some of the tech, and in doing so, they made a cast of Leota's daughter, Kim, and that's who you now see in the Haunted Mansion ride at Disneyland. I don't know if the same is true, if they brought that same change to Walt Disney World. Have to pay attention to that next time. But yeah, I was just so taken aback by the fact that there's just this rich history of women who not only were behind the scenes, but literally in the front of, everything. I mean, Madame Leota is iconic. She's on t-shirts, she's on merch, left, right, and center. And it's all because of this random encounter with a 16-year-old in Walt Disney's ink and paint department. And yeah, I mean, it's just crazy. All of this stuff kind of that comes full circle, and these synchronicities and these just intertwining histories between not only these women in the company, but each of these women, and how their relationships help to not just inform, but literally create some of the most iconic attractions known to mankind, and in turn, at the risk of getting super sappy, have created some of the most amazing memories for so many people, myself included. They've contributed rather to the creation of American history, specifically in the 20th and 21st centuries, to Americana, and just to the golden age of Disney. So yeah, I wish I had more to say about Mrs. Leota Lee Toombs, but that's kind of the nuts and bolts of what I've discovered thus far. I'll link the book I'm reading below about the female animators, and maybe some other resources, some articles and such, the D23 panel I mentioned. But yeah, we will be doing a video on Kim, we will be doing a video on Alice, we will be doing a video, of course, on Mary Blair, and a couple of others that I've been learning about. So if you're into this, if this has left you at all inspired or with like a smile on your face, please subscribe. Please comment below. Let me know if you know stuff about them that I don't. I'd love to find out some more facts. And yeah, I will see you guys on the other side. Thanks for watching, and cheers.